This week on Dan Really Likes Wine, a lesson in etymology, the study in the origin and history of words, and in this case, two words in particular. Lanzerac, from the Latin meaning to hang out in absolute luxury in some of the most beautiful vineyards in the world, and Pinotage, from the ancient Greek for to divide opinion. Well, not quite, but that is what Pinotage has done now for a century, because over 100 years the grape South Africa loves and calls its own hasn't always found friends in other parts of the world. So as we celebrate 100 years of Avia Imperiled grape, just how good is Pinotage, where has it got to, and do those people who don't like it have a point? Well, I don't think so, but I've got an expert to clarify it, because Lanzerac's cellar master, the man who calls this beautiful place home, is Wynand Lategan, and he knows just a little more than I do. It's always difficult trying to name your most beautiful wine estate in South Africa because there are so many that take the breath away. But in any list you compile, Lanzerac is always going to feature, and it's not hard to see why. It's a place that you call home, Wynand. And I mean, even you, as somebody who works here, must more often than not just look around and go, this is not a bad office.
Especially if you drive into the main entrance. I mean, sometimes I have to pinch myself, but you get a little bit used to it, and then every now and again when you get like a day like this with the sun out and the clouds in the background, it's a magical place, beautiful place to work.
There is beauty aplenty. There's also a huge amount of history to Lanzerac. Give us the very, very short version of what makes this such an important property for South Africa.
Yeah, Dan, not in terms of only the farm. I mean, it was established 1692, but in terms of the wine history, it's quite important. The first Pinotage produced in the world was a Lanzerac Pinotage, but even before that, there was wine produced on this farm through various stages, and I think for all my age of people and older folk, it holds quite memories, the Lanzerac and the wines and the cheese lunches and the rosés. So yeah, Lanzerac is quite important. It was part of Stellenbosch, the historic centre almost, and yeah, I think it's quite a legacy to carry. But of course, it's great to have that history, but also to looking forward.
When you took the job here, one of the first things you would have known is I'm going to be expected to make really good Pinotage, because Lanzerac does have that history. What is it about Lanzerac that allows us to produce that Pinotage?
Yeah, Dan, funnily enough, when I came here, there was one block of Pinotage, and that was probably the first words that my boss then told me, listen, we have to make a great Pinotage here. And it took, I must say, it took time to develop more vineyards and develop the styles and what we're looking for. And yeah, we actually, as we speak, I think we produce about 4 or 5 different Pinotages. And what makes Lanzerac so great for Pinotage, I work with quite a well-known winemakers to give me some guidance, and they say Stellenbosch is the perfect terroir for Pinotage. And back in the day, it was sort of treated as a stepchild, and wasn't always planted in the best vineyards and sites, but if you really are serious about it and plant it in the best sites, best terroirs, and treat it accordingly, you'll get the results. So we've got different sites on this farm. One of the things we're very proud of is our terroir. That's a Jonkershoek Valley, and that gives us a different expression of fruit, a little bit more elegance, I would say, in bit my acidity, but I think the main thing for us is to look for that balance between fruit, power, and mouthfeel. So yeah, big responsibility, but over time you get to know where to look and what to cover and what not to do. So yeah, very privileged to be making Pinotage.
We're actually in a Pinotage vineyard at the moment. The falling leaves and the colour of those that remain will showcase that it is autumn, and so there aren't any grapes to be seen, but it is the home of one of your blocks. that creates a grape that, as you've already mentioned, not everybody has always been a fan of. And there are a couple of American critics in particular, if we go back 40, 50 years, who had no time at all for Pinotage. Being as objectively as we possibly can.
Yeah.
This is like trying to say, were the Springboks really that good? As a Springbok fan, when we look back at Pinotage, can we say that some of that criticism was justified?
Dan, absolutely. I mean, your comparison between the Springbok rugby team is quite fitting, because if you look at the history about Pinotage, where it came from, it grown from Stellenbosch University, Welgevallen, and it was handed out to the multi rugby players, all Springboks, Japie Krieger, PK Morkel, C.T. de Waal, all those people. So I think, and you have to realize Pinotage is 100 years old this year, but the first wine was only made it in was a 1959 vintage, released in 61. So it's a very young variety, and so the chances we had to work with it wasn't that much. So I think in the beginning there was really some growing pains, but I think we've got it now under control. That's not the right term to say, but we sort of know how to work with it now. And I think the golden thread now is to look for that balance, but also elegance. So for me, Pinotage will, when you're young, you want to try to impress, so you work it a little bit too hard and you get the harsh tannins and that little bit over extracting. But I think looking forward, we'll very much in the vein of less is more. So the styles will be even fresher, more fruit driven, more elegance into it. And also some of them, depending on where you grow it, depending on terroir, will look towards the Pinot Noir style of Pinotage. So I think it's actually very exciting, looking to the next 100 years, how we're going to develop this variety. And it's proudly South African. It was born here, we grow it here, and I think like the Springbok team, we've sort of sorted out all our nonsense, and we better as one strong team. And I think one has to be proud about it, and not. I think one of the things that we as especially South Africans and winemakers was a little bit not as confident as we could be, but I think now we sort of in a place where we quietly confident and looking forward.
You've touched on the interpretation of style. You've referenced the centenary, which is so important. And you've also shown us here a vineyard. All of these things combine to make me really thirsty. So I think we need to go and try some Pinotage. He's talked a really good game so far. Let's find out if this Lanzerac Pinotage is really that good. Spoiler alert, it probably will be. So having had a bit of a look at a vineyard, albeit a vineyard in winter, time for some wine. It's the kind of day that I really love having Pinotage on, because it is a little chilly and it's got that wintry feel to it, and that's made for Pinotage. But before we actually drink the wine, let's have a little bit of a history lesson. 100 years ago, what I'm convinced was a slightly drunk professor at 3 in the morning thought, this is a good idea. Let's take 2 grapes and stick them together and see what happens. It was obviously a little more complicated than that, but give us your sense of how Pinotage came to be.
Yeah, Dan, you've sort of almost nailed it on the head, but not quite. I think if you go to Professor Perrault's head or try to figure out what he wanted to do, he did a lot of experiments, and if you look at Pinot Noir, that's famously difficult to grow, especially in South Africa. I think he was looking for some elegance and something that can work in the vineyard like Cinsault. So I think there was a reasoning behind his cross. And if you look, so that worked at the end. But if you look at Pinot Noir and Cinsault, they totally different from what Pinotage is. So it's a whole new variety with a new genetic code, and especially. But I think the professor was well traveled and well informed, so I think it was a. But nobody knows. But I think it was an educational guest.
The bit I can never get my head around, and you've already said as much, you have Pinot Noir, it's elegant, it's gentle, it's this aristocratic heartbeat of Burgundy, and then you get Cinsault, which you could drink a bottle of for breakfast and not realise, because it's really Ribena masquerading as wine. It's soft and fruity and red cherry and very, very easy to drink. And yet somehow these two come together, and the resultant Pinotage can often be peeling off the side of the scrum in a number 6 jersey. It can be a big brute of a wine. How do these two tiny little gymnasts of parents produce a loose forward?
I think that's the magic of what's happening in that genetic crossing. You know, you're not sure what the result is. You know, I mean, if you look at, for instance, this one is called the Prof, but it's a blend of Pinot Noir and Cinsault, and that one is totally different from what Pinotage became or is. And you know, we don't know where the next Springbok flanker is coming from. You know, genetics can play a role, but I think what is so exciting is that it's a new variety. It's something that can stand on its own. So yeah, Pinotage is that typical robust giving. I call it the teenager. You know, it's like a ultimate student almost. It's robust. But if you can handle it and keep your hand on it, you get a very you can get a very elegant and balanced wine. You know, so but it's you have to put on your boxing gloves to handle it.
You talk about learning about it, understanding it. Yes, it's a century of Pinotage, but it is 60 years or thereabouts that we've been properly making Pinotage and starting to understand it. Other grapes that we're more familiar with around the world have been going for hundreds of years and longer, and so there's far much more that we know about them. How far down the road do you feel collectively our South African winemakers are in really understanding what makes Pinotage tick?
Yeah, Dan, I think we've got the inside lane. You know, we've got the history of winemaking. We've learned a lot from the old world as well, and I think it's just a way way of just to fine tune it almost. I think the winemaking side and the viticulture side we've got under wraps, and the refining of the wine and grow on leaps and bounds. I would say the last 20 years, 30 years. I mean, I can almost compare it to the new South Africa. You know, or the new wine industry. When we in the early 90s, we came out of isolation, and then we had to learn quite a bit in a short time. And that, for me, that's the same for Pinotage. But I think we've got the whole of it. At least the last 10, 15 years, if you look at all the great Pinotages that comes out of this country. So yeah, I think it's just a question of respecting it and really focus on it. Then you can make great wine.
Pinotage has a parallel for me with Chardonnay in that both grapes have got a reasonably significant group of people who've either never actually had them or 15 years ago had one they didn't like, and as a result have decided, I hate Chardonnay, I'm never drinking Pinotage ever again because I had one that I didn't really like. So a big part of what I want to do, and I'm sure you do as well, is get those people to realise that, you know, 9 times out of 10 you're probably wrong about this grape. So in terms of now giving them, you've got great range here, the path back into Pinotage in 2025. What is it for you as a winemaker that is saying this is a grape that has to be part of your cellar?
Well, Dan, I had the privilege to, when I started here, to present wine to the most fierce critics, and they British wine masters, and I've shown them a wine that I didn't tell them beforehand what it is, and it was Pinotage, and they all raved about it. And then afterwards, when they saw what it was, they sort of was reserved about their praise. So, first and foremost, it's about the wine. You know, never mind if it's a Pinotage or a Shiraz or a Cabernet, but it has to be a well-made wine out of the right vineyard, right terroir. and then it's, I won't say it's an easy path, but if you make a proper good wine that's got all the elements, that's got power, not, I want, maybe power is a bit overused, but it's got elegance, got balance. I think that for me is a key thing. Pinotage has got a thick skin, so there is some tannin involved, so you have to manage that. But if you make a well-balanced wine that can age, that's got all the elements, fruit, power, tannin, longevity, long mouthfeel, I mean, the rest is easy. You just need to have people taste the wine. If you can convince them to taste again, I think you'll win them over. So I think the future of Pinotage is so bright. I mean, everybody that comes to this country wants to drink your uniquely South African wine, and that's Pinotage. So once the public is convinced, I mean, it's a little bit tougher on the critics, but the public is convinced. So yeah, I think drink Pinotage, and it's good for your heart as well. So
that's Dr. Wynand Lategan of the Lanzerac Health Academy. We've got a number of wines here. That, in its smaller version, was of course the historic first bottle. I've got a couple at home going back now 60 years or thereabouts. You've already mentioned the Cinsault and the Pinot Noir coming together. We'll come to this one in a moment when you drink it. This is quite cool. This is a throwback to that very first Pinotage of 1959.
Yes, Dan, that's the first Pinotage was wine made from grapes from Bellevue. It was a vineyard planted in 1953. So a few years ago we decided, yes, it would be a cool idea to recreate that wine, and I went back to the owners of Bellevue and convinced them at the end, can we have a few kilograms or tons of that vineyard? I mean, it's still in existence, and with the idea to recreate the first Pinotage. And luckily that was Dirkie Morkel. He said yes, let's go for it. So we made wine we started in 2017 with the idea to launch the wine in 2019 vintage in 21. That's exactly 60 years after the first Pinotage. And if you look at the first label, it's exactly it's a recreation of the first label, the old fonts. These are all fonts that we have had to redraw by hand because you can't get them on a computer. But that is from the original vineyard. It will state there from Bellevue, and it gives you a different take on Pinotage. It's a vineyard that's, like I said, it was over 70 years old now, and it gives you a little bit more of that Pinot Noir, softer, more elegant, refined sort of wine, which is truly satisfying to work with. Something totally different, So
and it's full of history, and it's a wonderful throwback to a great time. You've got the single vineyard here, and I think that's just a great expression of how one single vineyard can really lift and elevate a wine. But then there's this, and this is more than one celebration. This is not just celebrating a centenary of some rather good wine, but there are also a couple of language celebrations to be had there as well.
Yes, Dan, Afrikaans, the language is also officially 100 years old this year. So we decided, listen, let's just tip our hat towards that part of history as well. So we made our normal Pinotage. This is part of the Jonkershoek range, but we made a label totally in Afrikaans. So if you can look at the label, it's a Jonkershoek Vallei, Suid-Afrika, and in the back there is some Aboorneef poems. You can read all about that, and that is just a limited release we have got on the cellar on the 2022 vintage, to celebrate 100 years of Pinotage and 100 years of Afrikaans. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a collector's item.
Indeed it is. If you want more information on that, then my new show on CakeNet every Thursday, Dani Smaak Wyn Lekker Oor, will have full details. All right, you've kept me out in the cold long enough, so let's try some wine. Just from the very honest, simple winemaker's heart, as we try some of this Pinotage, just give me that sense of why, as you drink this, there is the satisfaction that this wine is giving you.
Yeah, I'm so glad it's a a cool, crisp morning, because that is what drinking red wine is all about. This wine for me has got that typical plums and prunes on the nose and on palate. Lots of forward fruit, but then in the end you get that acidity from the Jonkershoek Valley that keeps it fresh. And I think the tannins are soft. So yeah, I think it's a very satisfying wine to drink. I'll have another sip of this.
My good friend and junior director of Down Really Likes Wine, Michael Jordan, would classify this very specifically as Pinotage for people who don't like Pinotage, because it has all of those elements that people generally aren't expecting. And again, I think it's perception based on what people often heard or read or think they know about wine, that it's going to be this slightly large, clumsy, hit you over the back of the head kind of wine. And there are examples that you'll be able to find of that here and there, but this is where we are in 2025. And yes, it's a century on, but I think if Professor Perald was sitting at the table with us now and we gave him a glass of this, he'd be very pleasantly surprised where his mad experiment had got him a century later.
Well, I certainly hope so, Dan. And cheers, let's drink on another 100 years of Pinotage.
I shall put it in my diary. There we go. Look out, 2125 I shall be back at Lanzerac and enjoying this wine. And it's probably my closing request to you, and I know this will be echoed by my winemaking friend here today. Whether you're someone who drinks it reasonably often or somebody who's part of that, I'm not really a Pinotage kind of person, go out, find yourself a bottle, whether it's Lanzerac or one of the many other fine examples we have in South Africa. Give Pinotage another chance if you haven't of late, or find a new one if you do drink it from time to time. And either way, you've got a chance to not just celebrate great South African heritage, but celebrate great South African wine as well. From Lanzerac, cheers.
Cheers.